3 months into their new life at Morrison's Last Stand Ranch, Sarah woke each morning to the sound of roosters crowing and her children's laughter echoing from the kitchen below. The transformation in Emma and Michael had been remarkable. Emma had shed her worried, too-adult demeanor and was finally acting like the 8-year-old she was supposed to be. She had become Jake's shadow during evening chores, eagerly learning about caring for the animals and helping with the simpler tasks. Michael had blossomed in the wide-open spaces of the ranch, his natural curiosity finding endless outlets in exploring the property and learning about farm life. He had developed a special bond with Rosie, the gentle old mare, and Jake had been teaching him how to brush her and feed her carrots. The boy who had once been quiet and withdrawn now chattered constantly about his adventures and discoveries. Sarah had thrown herself into ranch life with an enthusiasm that surprised even her. She had taken over the bookkeeping completely, discovering that years of managing household finances on impossible budgets had given her skills that translated well to ranch management. She had also become the ranch's unofficial veterinary assistant, helping Jake with routine animal care and learning to recognize signs of illness or injury. More importantly, she had found peace in the rhythm of ranch life. There was something deeply satisfying about work that produced tangible results, about caring for animals that depended on you, about living in harmony with the natural world instead of fighting against it. The relationship between Sarah and Jake had developed slowly and carefully, built on mutual respect and shared responsibilities rather than passion and promises. They had become partners in the truest sense, working together to manage the ranch and raise the children. The attraction that had been present from the beginning had gradually deepened into something stronger and more lasting, genuine affection and trust. But they had not crossed certain lines. Jake still slept in the makeshift bedroom off the kitchen, and their relationship remained carefully undefined. They worked together, ate meals together, made decisions together, but there was an invisible barrier between them that neither seemed ready to cross. Everything changed on a crisp October morning when Sarah received a phone call that shattered the peaceful routine they had built. "Sarah? Baby, is that you?" Danny's voice on the other end of the line hit her like a physical blow. She had not heard from her ex-husband since the day he walked out, and she had begun to hope she never would again. "Danny," she said quietly, stepping onto the front porch where she could speak privately. Through the window, she could see Jake helping the children with their breakfast, and the sight of their domestic tranquility made her heart race with fear. "God, I've missed you," Danny continued, his voice carrying that familiar charm that had once swept her off her feet. "I've been looking for you everywhere. Where are you, baby? Where are my kids?" "They're not your kids anymore," Sarah said, finding strength in her anger. "You gave up that right when you abandoned them. Come on, don't be like that. I made some mistakes, I'll admit it, but I'm different now. I've got a great job, a nice apartment, and I want my family back." Sarah gripped the phone tighter, her knuckles white with tension. "What do you want, Danny?" "I want to see my children. I have rights, Sarah. Legal rights." "You signed away your parental rights when you left," Sarah said, though even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Danny had never formally signed away anything. He had simply disappeared. "Look, I know I hurt you, but this isn't about us anymore. This is about Emma and Michael. They deserve to know their father, and I deserve a chance to make things right." Before Sarah could respond, she heard Jake's boots on the porch behind her. She turned to see him approaching with a concerned expression, clearly having overheard at least part of the conversation. "Who is it?" he asked quietly. Sarah covered the phone with her hand. "It's Danny. He wants to see the kids." Jake's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "What do you want to do?" "I want him to disappear again," Sarah said honestly. "But I don't think that's going to happen." She uncovered the phone. "Danny, I can't talk about this right now. The children are getting ready for school." "Sarah, don't hang up on me. I'm serious about this. I've changed, and I want my family back. If you won't let me see them voluntarily, I'll get a lawyer involved." The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. Sarah knew that despite everything Danny had done, he was still legally the children's father, and courts often favored biological parents over step-parents, no matter how loving and stable the home environment. "Where are you?" she asked, dreading the answer. "I'm in Silver Creek." Staying at that motel by the highway. The same one where you were living before you disappeared. Sarah's blood ran cold. He was less than an hour away, close enough to show up at the ranch at any moment. I'll call you back, she said quickly, and hung up before he could respond. Jake moved closer, his presence solid and reassuring beside her. What's the situation? Sarah explained Danny's threats and his proximity, watching Jake's expression grow more serious with each detail. Can he really take them away? She asked. I don't know, Jake admitted. But we need to find out. I know a good family lawyer in Pine Valley. We should go see her today. What about the children? What do I tell them? Jake considered this carefully. We tell them their father wants to visit, but we don't scare them with details until we know more about what we're dealing with. That afternoon, while the children were at school, Sarah and Jake drove to Pine Valley to meet with Patricia Caldwell, a family law attorney with a reputation for being both tough and compassionate. Her office was small but professional, and she listened carefully as Sarah explained their unusual living situation and Danny's sudden reappearance. The morning sun was already high when Sarah finally made her decision. She packed their few belongings into 2 battered suitcases and a handful of garbage bags, leaving behind anything that would not fit in their old Honda Civic. Emma helped by carefully wrapping her few treasured books in old towels, while Michael clutched his stuffed elephant, the only toy that had survived their many moves. The drive to Morrison's Last Stand Ranch took them through increasingly rural landscape, past rolling hills dotted with sagebrush, and the occasional windmill turning lazily in the desert breeze. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as doubts continued to plague her mind. What if Jake had changed his mind overnight? What if he was not the man he seemed to be? What if she was making the biggest mistake of her life? Look, Mama, Emma called out from the back seat as they crested a hill. I can see horses. Sarah looked ahead and saw a modest ranch house nestled in a valley, surrounded by corrals and pastures where horses grazed peacefully. The house was single-story and weathered but well-maintained, with a wraparound porch and flower boxes under the windows that suggested someone cared about making it a home. As they drove up the gravel driveway, Sarah noticed Jake emerge from a red barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He had traded his cowboy hat for a baseball cap, and his work shirt was already stained with the honest dirt of morning chores. When he saw their car approaching, he set down his tools and walked toward them with an easy stride that somehow managed to be both confident and relaxed. Sarah parked next to his pickup truck and sat for a moment, gathering her courage. This was it, the point of no return. Whatever happened next would change all their lives forever. Jake approached the driver's side window, leaning down slightly to meet her eyes. Morning, he said simply. Glad you decided to come. We're here, Sarah replied, stating the obvious because she could not think of anything else to say. That you are, Jake agreed, his weathered face creasing into what might have been a smile. Why don't you folks come on up to the house? I've got fresh coffee brewing, and I think there might be some orange juice in the refrigerator for the little ones. As they climbed out of the car, Michael immediately gravitated toward Jake, looking up at him with wide, curious eyes. Do you have cows? He asked seriously. Sure do, Jake replied, crouching down to the boy's level. Would you like to see them later? Michael nodded enthusiastically, and Sarah felt some of her tension ease. Her son's instinctive trust in this man had to count for something. Emma was more reserved, staying close to her mother's side as they walked toward the house. At 8 years old, she had learned to be cautious around new people, especially men who made promises that might not be kept. The interior of the ranch house was simple but comfortable, with hardwood floors and furniture that looked like it had been built to last. The walls were decorated with photographs of horses and landscapes, and there were bookshelves filled with volumes on ranching, history, and what looked like classic literature. It was the home of a man who valued substance over style, and Sarah found herself oddly comforted by its straightforward honesty. The kitchen's this way, Jake said, leading them through a living room dominated by a large stone fireplace. I should warn you, I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage the basics. The kitchen was spacious and functional, with a large table that looked like it could seat 8 people comfortably. Jake poured coffee for Sarah and found juice boxes in the refrigerator for the children, an unexpected touch that suggested he had been thinking about their needs. I've been wondering, Sarah said as they settled around the table. Why did you really make this offer? I mean, taking in a complete stranger and her kids, it's not exactly normal. Jake was quiet for a moment, considering his answer, while Michael explored the kitchen with the fearless curiosity of a 4-year-old. About 10 years ago, I was in a bad place, he finally said. Lost my job, lost my girlfriend, pretty much lost everything I thought mattered. I was living in my truck, working day labor when I could find it. He paused to take a sip of his coffee. One day I was at a diner not much different from the Rusty Horseshoe, and this old rancher named Bill Henderson struck up a conversation with me. Before I knew it, he was offering me a job and a place to stay on his ranch. No questions asked, no background check, just a handshake and a chance. What happened? Emma asked, forgetting her shyness for a moment. I worked for Bill for 5 years, Jake continued. Learned everything I know about ranching from him. When he retired, he sold me this place for about half what it was worth, said he wanted to make sure it went to someone who would take care of it properly. Sarah began to understand. So you're paying it forward. Something like that, Jake agreed. Bill always said that sometimes people just need a chance to prove what they're capable of. I figure I owe it to his memory to give someone else that same opportunity. And if it doesn't work out? Sarah asked, voicing the fear that had been nagging at her since yesterday. Then, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Jake said simply. But I have a feeling we're going to surprise ourselves with how well this works. Over the next few hours, Jake showed them around the ranch. The children were enchanted by everything, from the horses in the pasture to the chickens pecking around the yard. Michael was particularly fascinated by a gentle old mare named Rosie, while Emma gravitated toward a border collie named Scout, who seemed to adopt her immediately. Sarah found herself impressed by the obvious care Jake had put into maintaining the property. The fences were in good repair, the animals looked healthy and well-fed, and there was an overall sense of order that spoke to good management and hard work. The guest rooms are upstairs, Jake explained as they returned to the house. There are 2 of them, so the kids can each have their own space, or they can share if they prefer. You can take the master bedroom downstairs. Sarah stopped walking. Where will you sleep? There's a small room off the kitchen that I've been using as an office. I can set up a cot in there, at least until we figure out more permanent arrangements. Jake, I can't let you give up your own bedroom. This is your house. It's our house now, he said quietly. At least, that's how I'd like to think of it. We're all going to have to make adjustments. That evening, after the children had been settled into their new rooms with promises of exploring more of the ranch tomorrow, Sarah found herself alone with Jake on the front porch. The desert sky was brilliant with stars, more than she had ever seen from their various apartments in town. It's beautiful out here, she said, wrapping a borrowed sweater around her shoulders against the cool night air. It grows on you, Jake replied. Sometimes I sit out here for hours, just listening to the quiet. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Sarah found the courage to ask the question that had been bothering her all day. What do you expect from me? I mean, you've made this incredible generous offer, but what do you want in return? Jake turned to look at her, his face serious in the starlight. I want you to be happy here. I want your kids to feel safe and loved. And I want us to build something good together, whatever that might look like. But what about the practical things? How do we make this work day to day? Well, Jake said thoughtfully, the ranch keeps me pretty busy during the day, and I could use help with the bookkeeping and general management. You mentioned you're good with numbers. As for the kids, they'll need to be enrolled in school. There's a good elementary school about 20 minutes away in Pine Valley. Sarah nodded, relieved to be talking about concrete details. What about money? I still don't have any way to contribute financially. The ranch makes enough to support all of us, as long as we're careful with expenses. And, like I said yesterday, this is a partnership, not charity. You'll be earning your keep. What if the kids don't adjust well? What if they miss their old life too much? Jake smiled. From what I saw today, I think they're going to love it here. And kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. As long as they know they're loved and wanted, they'll adapt. And what about us? Sarah asked quietly. How do we navigate this strange situation we've created? Jake was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I don't know. I've never been in a situation like this before. I guess we just take it one day at a time and see where it leads us. I need you to understand something, Sarah said, turning to face him fully. I can't afford to get my heart broken again. My kids can't afford for me to make another mistake when it comes to trusting the wrong person. I understand, Jake replied. And I need you to understand that I'm not your ex-husband. I don't make promises I can't keep, and I don't walk away when things get difficult. How can I be sure of that? You can't, Jake said honestly. Just like I can't be sure you won't decide this life isn't what you want and take off one day. We're both taking a risk here. The question is whether we think it's worth taking. Sarah considered his words, staring up at the vast canopy of stars above them. In town, light pollution had hidden most of the night sky from view, but out here the universe seemed infinite and full of possibilities. My ex-husband used to make promises under stars like these, she said softly. He'd tell me about all the things we were going to do together, all the ways he was going to take care of us. But when morning came, the promises always seemed to disappear with the darkness. I'm not much for making grand promises, Jake said. But I can promise you this. As long as you and those kids want to be here, you'll have a home. Not because of some romantic notion, but because it's the right thing to do. Something in his voice convinced her that he meant every word. There was a steady, unshakable quality to Jake Morrison that was completely different from Danny's flashy charm. Where her ex-husband had been all talk and no substance, Jake seemed to be the opposite, a man whose actions spoke louder than his words. The kids are already getting attached to you, Sarah observed. I'm getting attached to them too, Jake admitted. It's been a long time since this house had children's laughter in it. Were you married before? Sarah asked, then immediately felt awkward for prying. I'm sorry, that's none of my business. It's okay, Jake said. I was engaged once, about 10 years ago. Woman named Claire. She couldn't handle the isolation out here, said she felt like she was living at the end of the world. She gave me an ultimatum, sell the ranch and move to the city or lose her. What did you choose? The ranch, Jake said simply. I'd worked too hard for it, invested too much of myself in it. I couldn't give it up, not even for love. Do you ever regret that choice? Jake considered the question seriously. Sometimes I wonder what might have been. But I think we would have been miserable in the city, and eventually she would have resented me for it. Some people are meant for city life, and some people are meant for this. You can't force someone to be happy in a place that doesn't suit them. What makes you think we'll be happy here? Sarah asked. I don't know if you will be, Jake said honestly. But something tells me you might be. There's something about you that seems to fit this place, like you belong here. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. It had been so long since anyone had made her feel like she belonged anywhere. For years, she had felt like she was always on the outside looking in, never quite fitting in wherever she happened to be. Can I ask you something? She said. Shoot. When you said you'd take me too, what exactly did you mean by that? Jake was quiet for so long that Sarah began to wonder if she had overstepped some invisible boundary. Finally, he spoke. I meant that families shouldn't be separated unless there's no other choice. Those kids need their mother, and you need your children. Anything else that develops between us, well, that's something we'll have to figure out as we go. But you're attracted to me, Sarah said, not really asking a question. Jake looked at her directly, his eyes honest in the starlight. Yes, he said simply. I am. But that's not why I made this offer, and it's not why I want you to stay. I want you to stay because I think we can build something good here together, something that will benefit all of us. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. It had been so long since a man had looked at her with genuine interest, without wanting something from her in return. Danny had been charming in the beginning, but even then, there had been an edge of selfishness to his attention, a sense that he was more interested in what she could do for him than in who she really was. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Of me? Jake asked. Of this. Of trusting someone again. Of believing that good things can actually happen to people like me. People like you? Sarah struggled to find the words. People who've made bad choices. People who've failed at marriage, who've let their children down, who've had to ask strangers for help because they can't manage on their own. Jake reached over and gently took her hand, a gesture so simple and kind that it nearly brought tears to her eyes. Sarah, he said quietly, the fact that you were willing to ask for help for your children when you needed it doesn't make you a failure. It makes you a good mother. And The fact that you've been working 3 jobs to try to keep your family together doesn't make you weak. It makes you one of the strongest people I've ever met. For the first time in months, Sarah allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could work out after all. Sitting there on the porch of a ranch house under a canopy of stars, with her children safe and sleeping inside, and a good man holding her hand, she felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. Sarah Martinez stood at the edge of the dusty parking lot outside the Rusty Horseshoe Diner, her hands shaking as she watched her 2 children play near the old pickup truck. 8-year-old Emma was trying to entertain 4-year-old Michael with a broken toy horse, but, even from a distance, Sarah could see the exhaustion in her daughter's young face. The little girl had been forced to grow up too fast, becoming a second mother to her brother, while Sarah worked 3 jobs just to keep them fed. The Nevada sun beat down mercilessly on the small desert town of Silver Creek, and Sarah felt the weight of her impossible situation pressing down on her shoulders. Her ex-husband Danny had left them 6 months ago, taking their savings and leaving behind only mounting debts and broken promises. The eviction notice in her purse felt like it was burning a hole through the thin fabric. Tomorrow, they would have nowhere to go. Inside the diner, she had just finished her shift as a waitress, her feet aching in worn-out shoes that had seen better days. The tips had been meager, barely enough to cover gas money for their old car that threatened to break down at any moment. As she stood there trying to figure out their next move, she noticed a man sitting alone at a corner table through the window. He was tall and lean, wearing a well-worn cowboy hat that shadowed his weathered face. His boots were scuffed but well-maintained, and there was something solid and dependable about the way he sat, quietly nursing a cup of coffee while reading a local newspaper. Sarah had served him earlier, and he had been polite, leaving a generous tip despite ordering only coffee and pie. Jake Morrison had been coming to the Rusty Horseshoe for the past 2 weeks, ever since he had driven his cattle to the stockyard in Silver Creek. At 42, he owned a modest ranch about 50 miles north of town, a place he had built with his own hands after years of working for other people. He lived alone, preferring the company of his horses and cattle to the complications that seemed to follow him whenever he got too close to people. But there was something about the young waitress that had caught his attention. Not in a romantic way, at least not at first, but in the way her eyes held a familiar pain. He recognized the look of someone who had been knocked down by life, but was still fighting to get back up. He had worn that same expression years ago when he was starting over with nothing but determination and a dream of owning his own land. Jake had noticed the children too, the way they waited patiently in the parking lot while their mother worked, sharing a single sandwich between them. The little girl was clearly protective of her younger brother, and something about their quiet dignity reminded him of his own childhood, when his mother had struggled to raise him and his sister alone after their father died in a mining accident. As Sarah gathered her courage to approach the stranger, she rehearsed the words in her mind. It was crazy what she was about to do, but desperation had a way of making impossible things seem reasonable. Her children needed stability, needed someone who could provide for them in ways she simply could not. The man seemed kind, and there was something trustworthy about the way he carried himself. She pushed through the diner door, the little bell announcing her return. Jake looked up from his newspaper as she approached his table, her work uniform rumpled and her dark hair escaping from its ponytail. Up close, he could see she was younger than he had first thought, maybe 28 or 29, with brown eyes that held depths of worry and determination. "Excuse me," Sarah began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know this is going to sound strange, but I need to ask you something important." Jake set down his coffee cup and gave her his full attention. "Go ahead, miss. I'm listening." Sarah glanced toward the window where her children were still playing. Then, back at this stranger who might hold their future in his hands. "I've been watching you, and you seem like a good man. An honest man." She took a shaky breath. "I'm in a situation where I can't take care of my children the way they deserve. Tomorrow we're getting evicted, and I don't have anywhere else to go." Jake remained silent, sensing there was more she needed to say. "Those are my kids out there," she continued, nodding toward the parking lot. "Emma and Michael. They're good kids, smart kids, and they deserve better than what I can give them right now. I was wondering." Her voice cracked slightly. I was wondering if you might consider taking them in. Just temporarily, until I can get back on my feet. The request hung in the air between them like a bridge neither was sure they could cross. Jake studied her face, seeing the desperation there, but also the love. This was not a woman trying to abandon her children. This was a mother making the hardest decision of her life because she believed it was best for them. You don't even know me, Jake said quietly. For all you know, I could be dangerous. Sarah shook her head. I've been watching people my whole life, trying to figure out who I can trust and who I can't. The way you treated me when I served you. The way you've been sitting here reading instead of drinking or causing trouble. The way you left that big tip even though you only ordered coffee. She paused. And the way you looked at my kids when they walked past the window earlier. You looked at them like they mattered. Jake turned to look out at the children again. Emma was now sitting on the truck's tailgate, holding Michael in her lap while he dozed in the afternoon heat. The sight tugged at something deep inside him, a longing he had buried years ago when he decided that solitude was safer than risking his heart again. What about their father? He asked. Gone, Sarah said simply. Left us with nothing but debts and broken promises. Jake was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. My ranch is pretty isolated, he finally said. 50 miles from here, and the nearest neighbor is 10 miles away. It's no place for children who are used to town life. They're not used to much of anything stable, Sarah replied. We've been moving from place to place for months. At least on a ranch, they'd have space to run around, fresh air, maybe learn some responsibility. And what about you? Jake asked, looking directly into her eyes. Sarah was taken aback by the question. What about me? Where would you go? What would you do? I'd figure something out. Maybe get a job in the next town over, save up enough money to get us a proper place to live. I could visit them on weekends, or maybe they could come stay with me once I get settled. Jake shook his head slowly. That's not how it works with kids. They need consistency, not more upheaval. If you're going to trust me with your children, then you need to trust me with yourself too. Sarah stared at him, not sure she had heard correctly. I don't understand. I'm saying if you want me to take your children, then I'll take you too. All of you, or none of you. That's the only way I'll consider it. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had prepared herself for rejection, had even prepared herself for acceptance. But she had never expected this. A stranger offering to take in not just her children, but her as well. It seemed too good to be true, which in her experience usually meant it was. Why would you do that? She asked suspiciously. What's in it for you? Jake considered his answer carefully. I've been alone on that ranch for 8 years now. Built it up from nothing, but never really had anyone to share it with. Maybe it's time that changed. And those kids out there, they need both their parents, even if one of them isn't their biological father. Sarah felt tears threatening to spill over. You don't know anything about us. We could be nothing but trouble. Could be, Jake agreed. But something tells me you're not. Something tells me you're exactly what that ranch has been missing. I can't pay you, Sarah said quietly. I don't have any money to contribute. Ranch life isn't about money, Jake replied. It's about work, and from what I can see, you're no stranger to hard work. There's plenty that needs doing around the place, and I could use the help. Consider it a business arrangement if that makes you feel better about it. Sarah looked out at her children again, then back at this cowboy who was offering them salvation. You're serious about this? Dead serious, Jake said. But I need you to understand something. If you come with me, if you bring those kids to my ranch, then we're going to do this right. No halfway measures, no temporary arrangements. We become a family, or we don't do it at all. The word family hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities and fears. Sarah had not been part of a real family since she was a child herself. Danny had promised her a family, but what they had was more like a collection of people sharing the same space, never really connecting, never really committed to each other. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. I'm proposing that we take a chance on each other, Jake said simply. You need a place to raise your kids, and I need people to make my ranch into a home. We help each other out, see where it leads. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. She could refuse his offer and face homelessness with her children, or she could trust this stranger with everything she held dear. Neither choice felt safe, but one offered hope while the other offered only desperation. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course, Jake said, pulling a business card from his wallet and writing something on the back. Here's my number and the address to the ranch. If you decide you want to try this, pack up whatever you can fit in your car and drive out there tomorrow morning. If you don't show up, I'll understand. Sarah took the card, noting the ranch's name, Morrison's Last Stand Ranch. There was something both hopeful and fatalistic about the name that appealed to her sense of irony. And if I do show up, she asked. Then, we'll figure it out as we go along, Jake said, standing up and placing his hat on his head. One day at a time. As he walked toward the door, he paused and turned back to her. For what it's worth, I think those kids are lucky to have a mother who loves them enough to put their needs first. After he left, Sarah sat alone at the table for a long time, staring at the business card in her hands. Through the window, she watched Jake walk to a dusty pickup truck, saw him pause to wave at Emma and Michael before getting in and driving away. Her children waved back enthusiastically, and Sarah realized that in the span of one conversation, this stranger had shown her kids more kindness than their own father had in months. That evening, in their tiny motel room that smelled of cigarettes and desperation, Sarah sat on one of the sagging beds while Emma and Michael shared the other. She had explained the situation to them as simply as she could, watching their faces for signs of fear or confusion. So we would live on a real ranch? Emma asked, her eyes bright with interest. With horses and cows? Yes, sweetheart. If we decide to go. I want to see a cow, Michael announced solemnly, as if this was the most important thing in the world. What about Daddy? Emma asked, her voice smaller now. What if he comes back and can't find us? Sarah felt her heart break a little more. Even after everything Danny had put them through, Emma still held on to hope that he might return. Daddy knows where we are if he wants to find us, honey. And if we move to the ranch, I'll make sure he knows where we went. But, privately, Sarah doubted Danny would ever come looking for them. He had made his choice when he walked out, leaving them with nothing but heartache and unpaid bills. I like the cowboy, Michael said drowsily. He has nice eyes. Sarah smiled despite everything. Her 4-year-old son had always been a good judge of character, possessing an intuitive understanding of people that sometimes amazed her. If Michael trusted Jake, maybe she should too. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Sarah lay awake staring at the water-stained ceiling and thinking about the impossible choice before her. Every instinct told her not to trust a stranger with their lives, but desperation had a way of making the impossible seem reasonable. She thought about Jake's words, "I'll take you too." There had been something in his eyes when he said it, something that suggested he meant more than just offering them shelter. But Sarah had been burned badly by trusting too quickly before, and she was not sure she was ready to risk her heart again, even if it meant security for her children. As the night wore on, she made lists in her mind of all the things that could go wrong, balanced against all the things that might go right. When morning came, she still had not made her decision, but she knew she was running out of time to make one.